How's everyone doing today? It's your boy JJ Nomination, and today we are here with our final team for teams you should consider using for Madden 20 connected franchise mode. So far, let's just do a brief little recap of the teams we have covered. Cincinnati Bengals being one of them, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Arizona Cardinals, the Miami Dolphins, the New York Giants, the Detroit Lions, the Carolina Panthers, and finally, the 8th and final team on this list, because you know I try to include at least 8 teams per year. I think last year I may have done 8 or 9 teams. This year it's going to be 8. The next team and the last team is going to be the Oakland Raiders. This is an interesting one. I'll be glad to explain it position by position. Let's just go ahead and get right into it. By the way, these aren't my rosters, so don't be super judgmental of the ratings. I didn't make these, so just putting it out there. First off, we got to start off with the quarterback position. Derek Carr. Derek Carr, in my opinion, is one of the most overrated quarterbacks in the NFL. That doesn't mean he's a bad quarterback, but let's be honest. He had one great season, one great MVP caliber season, then he gets hurt, and then he never really recovered or reached anywhere near that form ever again. And it's pretty sad. And this year, he's going to have the weapons to do so, not to reach MVP status, but to be a really good quarterback this season. And if he's not able to do it, there's no excuses, because he's getting one of the best wide receivers in the game, a fresh young rookie running back who was drafted as a first rounder for a reason and was talked about as the only first round running back for a reason. You're getting a couple of offensive linemen as well, so I mean, there is no excuses for Derek Carr this season. You know, he was getting talked about as like the next Aaron Rodgers, and he has not lived anywhere near to those expectations. For me, he's a below average quarterback, but he is leaning closer to being average than complete dog shit. So that's one thing that Derek Carr has going for him, in my opinion. And plus, this is kind of his audition year, because John Gruden has shown before he's not afraid to move on from veteran quarterbacks from the last regime and put his own guy in place. So for Derek Carr, this could be a make or break season. And then behind him, you have Mike Glennon, who, you know, he's a decent pair of hands, not a guy that I would really want starting a full season like the Chicago Bears almost did. But he's a decent backup. And Nathan Peterman, who's not on this roster, he's there. He's also terrible. Don't really have to go in depth with him. Now we go to the running back room. Isaiah Crowell is on the roster, but the starter is going to be Josh Jacobs. Josh Jacobs, a rookie running back from Alabama, has a very similar running style to Le'Veon Bell. I'm not saying he is Le'Veon Bell, so before you guys bash me on, oh, you're comparing this rookie to Le'Veon. No, that's not what I'm doing at all. It's similar to what I said about DeAndre Baker, the corner from Georgia. I said there are things that you see on tape that make him look like Richard Sherman. However, I'm not comparing him to Richard Sherman. I'm just saying there's a couple of things you see that you think, wow, Richard Sherman does that pretty well too. Same thing here with Josh Jacobs. The way that he runs with balance and patience, you would think he's Le'Veon Bell 2.0. However, I'm not making that direct comparison. I just say there are a couple of things that you can see that'll remind you of Le'Veon Bell. But that's the guy who I think is going to be the starter. Crowell will be a nice little power back, change of pace guy. You also have Doug Martin, who probably won't make the roster, but we'll see. Jalen Richard and DeAndre Washington, 2 decent running backs to have on the team. And then Chris Warren, who is, you know, basically a special teamer, more of a fullback than a running back. But it's a decent running back room. Like I said, if Josh Jacobs can emerge as the guy, then you got yourself a pretty solid running back for years to come. And for fantasy owners out there, I don't draft rookies. I'm just gonna be honest. Me personally, you know, I've been playing fantasy for 4 years, maybe 5 years. I've been to the championship round every single year. I've won 2 championships. I'm just gonna put it out there. Take my advice. I don't draft a whole lot of rookies. Josh Jacobs is a guy that I would probably look into drafting. Not super early, but, you know, closer to the mid-rounds. That's a guy I would definitely look at, especially if he's still there. At fullback, they have Keith Smith. I believe he played with the Cowboys. I don't know. But here we are at this wide receiving core. It's a pretty good one. Martavius Bryant is actually like suspended or on the exempt list. I don't know what it's called, but yeah, he's not going to play. But this is a stacked wide receiver room in terms of depth. Not really like, but two players really stand out. But they're really like, there's a lot of competition for who's going to get on the field, who makes the roster. But first, let's start off with Antonio Brown, arguably the best receiver in football, always in the top 2 or 3 for that discussion. Very reliable receiver, can play on the outside or the outside. Probably the best slot receiver if he were purely playing in the slot, but he can just do a lot of everything. A very technically sound receiver as well, and he doesn't really show any signs of slowing down, so Antonio Brown's going to be good for a long time. Then you have Tyrell Williams, who is more of a deep threat, big body receiver. He's 6'4". He's got pretty solid speed. Tyrell Williams was pretty good with the Chargers, never really reached his full potential there because, when you're playing next to Keenan Allen, and even when Keenan Allen wasn't there, it's like he never really reached his true potential. Maybe they can unlock something here in Oakland. You also have Ryan Grant, who I don't know if he's going to be the slot receiver, but he's a decent receiving option nonetheless. We already went into depth about Martavius Bryant and his situation. Next, we have Hunter Renfrow, who I think is a really good slot receiver. At least he was in college. I think in the NFL he could definitely, find some life as a slot receiver. He just, for a guy like him who is smaller, a little bit smaller for the receiver position, he has a huge catch radius. He seems to just catch anything within the area, within reach. He just seems to catch everything. And you need a guy like that, especially with Derek Carr, who, he's a fairly accurate quarterback, but he's not the most accurate guy in the world. So a guy like him with a big catch radius, that's going to help out a ton. And then right here you have J.J. Nelson, who is a true definition deep threat wide receiver. He's one of the fastest guys in terms of straight line speed. Of course, he's not Tyreek Hill or John Ross, but he's pretty close. I mean, he's not too far behind. And then you have Dwayne Harris, who is more of a kick returner, more of a special teams guy. Pretty solid one at that. And then you have Marcel Aitman, who broke out last year as a 7th-round pick, especially towards the second half of the season. I hope he does get more opportunities because he did prove last season that he could do the most with his opportunities. And then this team has Sade Blacknall, who I don't know a whole lot about, so I'm not really going to comment. Now we get to the tight end room. It's a very interesting tight end room. I don't know who's going to emerge as the guy, but they have Luke Wilson, who has experience as a starter and as a second tight end. He's played with Seattle and Detroit. He's coming here in Oakland. He's not going to be the best starting tight end. This isn't a guy I would target in fantasy football either for those that play fantasy. But he's decent. Maybe he'll do the job, get a few catches here and there. But it sucks going from Jarrett Cook to Luke Wilson. And then you have Foster Moreau from LSU. A pretty solid tight end coming out. I wasn't as high on him as some because LSU just really doesn't use the tight end position. But something that's been proven in the NFL is, at least with tight ends especially, production in college just doesn't matter. Because George Kittle is literally one of the best tight ends in the NFL, and he only had like 22 catches coming out in his final year of college with Iowa. So for Foster Moreau, who knows, man? Maybe he ends up being a beast as a tight end. We'll have to wait and see. And then Derek Carrier, more of a speedy guy, not really a consistent enough catcher. And then you have Eric Swoop, who, yeah, he's decent. Darren Waller, more of a glorified wide receiver playing tight end. And then Andrew DePoyla, who's more of a special teamer. And then Trent Singh, who is more of a long snapper. It's funny that he's a rookie and he's like 36 years old. But yeah, he's a long snapper. That's basically why he's there. And then at left tackle, you have Trent Brown, who was pretty decent last year for the Patriots. I know a lot of that is scheme-based, but with the 49ers, he was a pretty solid right tackle, at least as a pass-blocking right tackle. As a run blocker, not the greatest. which is kind of surprising because he's built like a big mauling, tackle. You look at his size, it's 6'8", 380. You would expect him to just be a big mauling right tackle who can run people over, but he actually has developed a little bit more finesse to his game, which is pretty good. We'll see what he can do as the left tackle, making a lot of money. And then David Sharp, decent backup, nothing too special. Actually, yeah, fun fact, both of these guys went to Florida. That's cool. And then at left guard, they brought Richie Incognito out of retirement. I don't know what he's going to look like in his first year back in action in a while, so that'll be interesting. If he is a solid, at least a serviceable solid guard, then that's all that the Raiders will really need, because they did lose Kelechi Osemele, and this Justin Murray guy I don't know a whole lot about. And then at center, you have Rodney Hudson, arguably one of the best centers in football. Of course, you have like Alex Mack, Travis Frederick, Jason Kelsey, all in that conversation. But I would argue Rodney Hudson is probably closer to number 1 or number 2 than number 3 or number 4 out of those guys. Rodney Hudson's been very consistent throughout his career. And you also have Jordan Devey, who I don't know a whole lot about. And then at the other guard position, you have Gabe Jackson, who, he's a serviceable starter at best. And then Chaz Green is terrible. This is the guy who was playing left tackle for the Cowboys one week and gave up 6 sacks to Adrian Claiborne. He's absolutely terrible. And then at right tackle, you have Colton Miller, who in my opinion, he looks like a very underwhelming pick, but we have seen players struggle and do better in year 2. Maybe Colton Miller could be a guy who does that. Denzel Good was a decent tackle, nothing too special for the Colts, but obviously they drafted Braden Smith, which meant he was expendable. And then Brandon Parker, a second-year tackle. Maybe he ends up taking that next step. Maybe he gets better with his development. But something I've realized here, Trent Brown and Colton Miller are both the starting tackles, and they're both 6'8". So you got 2 monsters in front of you. Now let's go to the defensive line. Like I said, these aren't my rosters. Don't bitch about ratings. But you have Clelin Ferrell, and a lot of people bash the Oakland Raiders for, taking Clelin Ferrell. Not because he was a bad player, but because you had better players on the board, such as, Ed Oliver, Devin White. Those are just a couple that come to mind. Josh Allen as well, the edge rusher from Kentucky, who is more of an off-ball linebacker. But you go with Clelin Ferrell, a very productive pass rusher out of Clemson, just a hard worker. Nothing too special in terms of his athleticism, but he is just very good at what he does. And in my opinion, that's probably the safest pick they could have made, and it's a good pick, and I don't think it's a terrible one. I don't think it's one that deserves to be bashed as much as the Daniel Jones at 6 pick, because, it's not that terrible. It's not the worst pick that the Raiders could have made in the first round. This is actually a really good pick. An unpopular opinion, I like what the Oakland Raiders did, not only in the first round, but in the entire draft. So I like the Clelin Ferrell pick because he was one of my favorite players coming out before the Combine, so I'm staying consistent. Then you have Coney Ealy, who was good for like 1 year in Carolina and has never recovered. I'm actually surprised he's still in the league. It's not me saying he's a bad player. It's just me saying, he had that one breakout year for Carolina and he's never recovered. He's bounced around from team to team and somehow he ended up here. And then Sam McCaskill, I don't know a whole lot about. Then we go to the right end position. You have Max Crosby, who does have a chance to be a starter as a rookie. Another pretty productive pass rusher out of Eastern Michigan. Not going to blow you away athletically, but one of the more technically sound guys in the draft. Then you have Arden Key, who is the complete opposite. A really good athlete who has the physical makeup, who has the aggression, but he's just kind of, a lousy worker. I mean, that's at least the reputation that's been placed on him in the league, is he's just not a hard worker. He hasn't developed the pass rush move. And it's kind of sad, man, because he's a former 5-star recruit, went to LSU, was a beast, and then, he went back to school for another year, and then he just really wasn't that explosive or that good. And then he gets drafted, and he's just kind of here. He's just kind of here to be in the league, and he hasn't really done anything. Alex Barrett, solid depth guy, and then Jeremiah Valaga. I don't know a whole lot about. At defensive tackle, they are, pretty deep at that defensive tackle room. I really like it. You have Maurice Hurst last year, who was a rookie. Of course, he had that critical heart condition. Luckily for him, he's been able to play at a high level. You also have Jonathan Hankins, who you re-signed for 2 years. That was a pretty good move to keep him. Justin Ellis, another solid depth guy. Same thing with PJ Hall and Eddie Vanderdoes or whatever, and Gabe Wright. So you have a lot of solid depth behind these two guys right here. Defensive tackle is one position they were strong at, and unlike the New York Giants, they didn't use a pick or waste a pick on a interior defensive lineman because they realized, hey, we're already strong at that position. Now we get to the linebacking core. It's nothing too special. Tahir Whitehead's kind of a low-end starter at this point of his career. Marquel Lee is okay. And then Quentin Bell, as a rookie, we'll see if he makes the roster, what his role will be. Kind of a decent player. And then right here you have Brandon Marshall, not the wide receiver, but the linebacker. He's decent. He's just a little bit on the older side. We'll see what he has left in the tank. Nicholas Morrow, another decent player as well, and then Jason Cabina, I don't know a whole lot about. And then we get to the right outside linebacker position. There's Vontaze Burfict, who was never really a great athlete, just a guy who, is a pretty solid football player. I know he has the reputation of being a dirty player, but outside of the antics, which, it's really hard to look outside of the antics sometimes. He's a solid football player. Kyle Wilbur at this point, more of a special teamer, but he's a decent player. Then we get to the cornerback room. Some question marks, definitely. You have Gary Conley, who's entering year 3. Is he going to break out? Nevin Lawson, pretty solid starter, nothing too special. Trayvon Mullen, who was a second rounder out of Clemson. He's probably going to be the starter here, and Nevin Lawson's probably going to be the nickel corner. Trayvon Mullen I actually liked, but I have to see what he looks like. They also drafted another corner, Isaiah Johnson from Houston. I believe he was a 4th rounder. Another solid option, good depth at least. Nick Nelson from last year, another solid depth guy. And then these 3 guys at the bottom, I don't know a whole lot about. Then we get to the free safety position, of course. LaMarcus Joyner, that was one of their big signings for the defensive side of the ball. And he warranted a 4-year contract, and I believe he's making around $44 million a year. And, I bring up Landon Collins a lot when it comes to other safeties because this is an example of a safety that can do it all. He can play inside as a sub-linebacker. Even though he's a smaller guy, he just plays with aggression. He can cover over the top. He can be a nickel corner. And this is a guy who can do everything. And he got paid less than a glorified, undersized linebacker by Landon Collins. So it's just wild. And then you have Chris Lamons and Motrell, who I don't know a whole lot about. And then at strong safety, you have Carl Joseph, who has been rumored to be traded. And then, of course, you have Jonathan Abram. I'm going to talk about Jonathan Abram for a second. So he also has the potential to play a lot of different positions. He's a guy who could play sub-linebacker, free safety, strong safety, and nickel corner. He did all of that at Mississippi State, and based on the film, man, he did all of that at a high level. He's just a high-intensity player. He has a great motor. He's a pretty good run stopper, but he leads in with his head a little bit too much, and all I can think about is Ryan Shazier whenever I see people do that. So he's going to have to cut that tendency out, but he plays at a high level. He's just got high energy, a high motor, and he just does everything so well, and he has great range as a coverage guy. And then right here, Damon Webb, I don't know a whole lot about. Then when you get to the kicker position, they have Daniel Carlson and Johnny Townsend, who I believe were both rookies last year. So yeah, this roster, pretty solid roster for sure in terms of a rebuild. But they're on here because you could decide to move on from Derek Carr if you go long term with this. You also have to worry about stopping basically what's going to be the most overpowered player in Madden 20, I should say, Patrick Mahomes, who has all these superstar X factors, and he's just a great player in this game that's going to be coming out. You also have Denver, who's going to have a really good defense, probably going to be revamped by their new coach Vic Fangio. And then the Chargers, who are the most complete team in your division. You know, you're going to have to figure out how to get past all of them to make it to the playoffs. Luckily, you have players like Antonio Brown, LaMarcus Joyner, who could help you out, but you know, you still have to help build this team up. But hopefully you guys have enjoyed all of these videos, and let me know down below which team would you choose for a rebuild. Peace.